The wind blew hard through the streets of the cold colony. Snowflakes danced in the air, landing softly on rooftops, lights, and empty crates. Jack pulled his coat tighter around his body, his breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. It was late, and most of the market was shut down. Only a few old lights blinked on and off, barely giving any light. He was walking home after a long shift at the repair docks. His boots crunched the snow underfoot, each step echoing in the silent street. Then he heard something, a soft, broken sound. It was not the wind, not a machine, not a bird. It was a whimper, like someone crying very quietly. Jack stopped, turned his head, and looked into a dark alley between two abandoned buildings. He stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. There, hidden behind broken crates and trash, sat a small figure. Next to her, lying weakly against the wall, was someone bigger, a woman, holding the child in her arms, both wrapped in thin cloth that barely looked warm enough for a summer night. The child looked up at Jack with wide, scared eyes. Her small face pale and thin, her feet were bare, pressed against the frozen ground. And they were purple, not from bruises, but from cold. Jack's stomach twisted. He took a slow step forward, raising his hands gently. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. The mother looked up too, her eyes filled with fear and shame. Her lips were cracked, her body shaking. She tried to pull her child closer, but even that seemed hard for her now. "We just need one hot meal," she whispered, barely able to speak. "I'll do anything. Just feed her." Jack stood still, not sure what to say. He looked down at the child again, then back at the woman. She was not old, maybe in her 20s, but her eyes looked much older, like someone who had seen too much, lost too much. "You don't have to offer anything," Jack said finally. But the woman slowly nodded, as if she didn't believe him. "As long as she eats tonight," she said, "I'll be yours. Just please don't let her die like this." Jack took off his coat and wrapped it around the child. The little girl flinched at first, but then leaned into the warmth. Her small hands grabbed the edges of the coat like it was the most precious thing in the world. The mother looked at Jack with tired eyes that didn't understand kindness anymore. "What's your name?" Jack asked, kneeling down. The woman looked away. "I had a name," she said, "before the camps." Jack didn't ask more. "Not yet. Come with me," he said gently. "I have food and heat at home." The woman didn't move right away. Her mind was screaming not to trust him. Everyone before had lied, hurt, taken something, but her daughter. Her daughter was slipping into sleep, and if she slept out here tonight, she might never wake up again. She stood, slowly, almost falling. Jack reached to help, but she backed away. "I'll carry her," she said, picking up her child, her arms. Shook from the effort, Jack led the way, walking slow so she could keep up. Snow fell harder now, covering their footsteps behind them. The colony lights were far away, but Jack's home was close. A small shelter built with scrap and old tech, but it was warm inside. The air smelled of spice and stew. He lit the fire, and the room glowed with orange light. The woman set her daughter down near the fire. The girl reached out, tiny hands trembling. Drawn to the warmth, Jack poured soup into a bowl and gave it to the girl. She drank it slowly, then faster. Her eyes lit up for the first time just a little. The mother sat on the edge of the room, not touching the food. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, her eyes down. Jack walked over and placed a second bowl near her. "Eat," he said. "This is not a trade." She didn't answer, but tears rolled silently down her cheeks. She picked up the bowl and took a small sip. She hadn't eaten real food in days, maybe weeks. Her hands trembled more now. Not from cold, but from something deeper. Disbelief, maybe, or broken trust, trying to heal. Jack watched from across the room. The girl was already dozing. Full and warm, curled up in his coat. The mother held the empty bowl close to her chest like a memory. Jack didn't ask questions tonight. He just added more wood to the fire and sat down near them. The wind howled outside, but inside, for the first time in a long time, the mother and child were safe. The fire crackled softly as the little alien girl slept, her small face now peaceful. Her hand still clutching Jack's coat, the mother sat quietly near the wall, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes watching every move Jack made, even now in warmth and safety. Her body was tense, ready to run, ready to fight. Jack didn't say much. He moved slowly, not to scare her, placing more wood in the fire, adjusting the blankets on the child. The mother looked like she hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. Her eyes were red. Her lips still cracked, but she refused to lie down. "You can sleep," Jack said gently. "There's no lock on the door." The woman didn't reply. She just sat there like a ghost, trapped between fear and shame. After a while, Jack went to the small kitchen unit and poured hot water into a clean cup. He brought it to her, holding it out with an open hand. "No strings," he said softly. "Just drink. It'll help." She took it slowly, her fingers brushing his for a second. They were ice cold. Jack sat across from her. "Not too close, not too far. You don't have to pay me," he said again. "I'm not like the others." The woman stared into the cup, then whispered, "Everyone says that before they take what they want." Jack nodded slowly. "I won't ask again," he said. "I just want you both to be warm and fed." Her shoulders dropped a little, not in trust, but in exhaustion. She looked at her sleeping daughter, then back at Jack. "If you're lying, just wait until she's better," she said. "Then do what you want." "I'm not lying," Jack said quietly. "She's safe here, and so are you." The mother gave a weak nod and sipped the water. The silence returned, but it was softer this time, not sharp like before. Hours passed, and Jack stayed awake while the two slept. He checked the fire, checked the sensors at the door, and kept a small knife near his chair. Not because he feared the mother, but because this colony wasn't safe at night. Thieves, slavers, and worse often roamed the streets when the lights went out. At sunrise, the mother finally moved. She stood slowly and looked down at her daughter. The girl was still asleep, cheeks pink from warmth, lips no longer blue. The woman walked to the kitchen area and saw bread and dried meat on the counter. She touched nothing, just stared. Jack opened one eye from his chair. "Take it," he said, his voice still rough from sleep. "It's there for you." The woman picked up a piece of bread and ate slowly. Still unsure if this was real, her stomach hurt from eating too fast last night, but the hunger was stronger. "You got a name?" Jack asked. Stretching a little, the woman hesitated, then nodded. "Lyra," she said softly. "My name was Lyra." Before Jack stood and offered his hand. "I'm Jack," he said, "and I don't care what your past is." "Lyra." She didn't shake his hand, but she did nod again. "I used to be someone," she said quietly, "before they took us." Before the mines, Jack didn't ask for details. He'd seen what the slave mines did to people, how they broke bodies and souls. The fact that she was still standing, still fighting for her child, said enough. The little girl woke up, rubbing her eyes. She looked around, confused, until she saw Jack and Lyra. Then she smiled a small, shy smile. Land ran to her mother. Lyra bent down and held her close, her arms tighter than ever. She smiled. Jack said with a surprised chuckle. Lyra looked at him with quiet eyes. "She hasn't smiled in weeks," she whispered, "not since her father died that day." Jack showed them the rest of his small home. It wasn't much, just one room, a bathroom, and a shared living space. But it was safe, and it was warm. He gave them the bed, and he slept in a chair. He cooked simple meals and showed the little girl how to hold a spoon properly. At first, Lyra watched everything with fear. When Jack picked up a tool, she flinched. When he raised his voice at the radio, she pulled her daughter close, but slowly. She began to relax. On the third night, she finally asked, "Why are you doing this?" Jack didn't know how to answer at first. He looked at the fire, then at the child, who was coloring with broken crayons. "Because no one helped my sister when she needed it," he said. "I won't make the same mistake." Lyra didn't reply, but she sat closer to the fire that night. She didn't offer herself. Didn't whisper any bargains. She just sat there tired, broken, but beginning to heal. And Jack didn't push. He just let her and the child stay. Because sometimes, kindness was the only weapon that truly worked. The days passed slowly but peacefully. Lyra no longer jumped at every sound. Her daughter, now smiling more often, learned how to say Jack's name. She would follow him around the shelter, pointing at tools and asking questions in her soft, alien voice. Jack started calling her little one. Because Lyra hadn't shared her real name yet, maybe she had forgotten it, or maybe it was too painful to say. Either way, Jack didn't push. He just smiled whenever the child tugged on his sleeve, asking, "What's that? Human?" One cold morning, Jack came back from town with fresh supplies. He had traded a few machine parts for food, soap, and a warm coat for the child. When he walked into the shelter, he found the girl napping on the floor, covered in Jack's old blanket. Lyra was in the bathroom, door slightly open, steam coming from inside. He heard a soft sound, a gasp, like pain held too long, then silence. Jack stood near the door, unsure if he should speak. "Lyra," he called gently. "You okay? In there?" There was a pause, then her voice, low and shaken. "Yes. I'm fine." But she wasn't when Lyra came out a few minutes later. Her wet hair tied back, her eyes red from silent tears. She wore one of Jack's old shirts, clean and long enough to cover her knees. But as she reached for the child, the shirt slipped off her shoulder. Just a little. Jack saw them. Scars, thin lines, wide burns. Old wounds from a collar that had once wrapped tightly around her neck and shoulders. Marks that screamed of pain, of chains, of punishment. Jack didn't say anything, but Lyra froze. She pulled the shirt up quickly, turning away. "You saw," she whispered, voice hollow. Jack nodded slowly. "I saw," he said, "but I'm not judging." Lyra sat beside her daughter and pulled her close. "She was born in the mines," she said suddenly, her voice flat. "I worked there. Digging, carrying, cleaning." She didn't look at Jack as she spoke. "I met a man. Another slave, from my world. He made me laugh." Even there, her eyes drifted toward the fire. "We planned to escape," she continued. "When I was pregnant," he said, "we had to try." Her voice cracked. "They caught him first. Beat him in front of everyone." She wrapped her arms around her knees. "I gave birth alone in a dark tunnel, with no help, no medicine." Jack said nothing, just sat with her in the silence. Lyra turned her face toward him at last. "You think I'm broken," she said, a bitter smile on her lips. Where he kept an old bag, he pulled out a small device and handed it to her. It was a scanner, something simple, something portable. "You're not broken," he said. "You're still alive, and if you're willing, I can help you heal." Lyra held the scanner like it was a precious thing. Her fingers traced the soft buttons. "I've never had healing," she whispered, "only surviving." That night, as the child slept in Jack's bed, Lyra sat by the fire. Jack carefully applied a healing gel to the worst of her scars. Her back trembled with every touch, not from pain, but from memory. Jack worked quietly, gently, with care, and Lyra said nothing more, only breathing slow, deep breaths as the gel worked its way into her skin. After he was done, Jack wrapped her shoulders in a fresh cloth and stepped away. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "Not now, not ever." Lyra looked at him, her eyes shining. "I know," she whispered, "but I want to stay." "Not because I have to." Jack smiled for the first time that night. "Then stay," he said. "This place is yours too now." The next morning, Lyra woke before the sun. She cleaned the small kitchen, folded the old blankets, and even fixed one of Jack's tools when he saw her standing there, holding the fixed scanner with pride. He chuckled. "You know tech?" he asked, surprised a little. She replied with a smile. "I used to be an engineer before the camps." That was the first time he saw her as more than a mother, more than a broken soul. She was strong, skilled, and still standing, and somewhere deep inside her, a spark was coming back to life. The scars hadn't disappeared overnight, but something had changed, not just in Lyra, but in the air around them. For the first time, she stood tall, not hiding, not flinching. And Jack saw not a victim, but a survivor, a fighter, the child. Woke up and ran to hug her mother, laughing, and in that laughter, the room felt lighter, warmer. The sky turned red as the sun dipped behind the colony walls. It was quiet to quiet. Lyra stood near the window, her eyes sharp, her hands drying a clean bowl. Jack was working on a small engine core at the table. The little girl hummed softly as she colored on a piece of scrap paper. Then the hum of engines grew louder, not the soft sound of mining ships or cargo drones. This sound was different, heavier, meaner. Jack looked up, eyebrows tight. Lyra froze, her whole body tense in. An instant, she stepped outside without a word, her feet light like a shadow. Jack followed, wiping his hands on a cloth. They both stood in the cold air as a large black ship landed in the center of the colony square. Its sides were marked with rusted symbols, ones Jack didn't recognize. But Lyra did. Her face turned pale, her breathing shallow. Jack saw it in her eyes before she said anything. "Slavers," she whispered, "they're back." The ship opened with a loud hiss. 4 tall figures stepped out to humans, one green-skinned alien, and a broad man with cybernetic eyes. They walked with confidence, scanning the area like they owned it. One of them carried a glowing tablet that displayed images. Jack caught a glimpse pictures of slaves, faces marked as escaped property. He turned to Lyra. "We have to hide you," he said quickly. She didn't move, her eyes locked on the slavers like she was back in the mines again. "They'll search every room," she said softly. "They always do." Jack's jaw tightened. "Not this time," he said. "Not my place. Back inside." Jack locked the door and pulled down a hidden panel in the wall. It opened into a tight crawl space just big enough for Lyra and the girl. Neck, sensing the fear in the air. "Don't speak," Jack told them. "Don't move unless I say." Lyra hesitated, placing one hand on Jack's arm. "If they find you helping us," she began. Jack shook his head. "They won't," he said firmly. "And if they do, I'll deal with it." He closed the panel, covering it with a shelf and some old boxes. Then he sat down at the table, picked up a broken tool, pretended to work. Minutes later, there was a NACA heavy one. Then another, louder. Jack stood and opened the door. The slaver with cyber eyes stepped inside without asking. "Evening," the man said, his voice cold and sharp. "We're looking for someone?" Jack leaned against the table, arms crossed. "I'm not a shelter," he said, "just a mechanic." The man lifted the tablet and showed a blurry image of Lyra. "Seen her?" he asked. "She's a runner, and we get paid good to bring her back." Jack stared at the image for a second, then shook his head. "Never seen her," he lied calmly. The slaver narrowed his eyes. "Mind if we look around?" Jack shrugged. "You'll find broken engines and dust," he said. Stepping aside, the men searched the room, opening cabinets, kicking over boxes. One of them moved toward the wall panel. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The man reached out, then paused. "Nothing here," he muttered. Walking away, Jack stayed still. breathing slow. Lyra and the girl were behind that wall, not even 2 feet away. One wrong sound, and everything would be over. The cyber-eyed leader turned to Jack again. "If you do see her," he said slowly, "don't get any ideas. She's not worth your trouble." Jack forced a tight smile. "I don't deal in people." He replied, "Only machines." The slavers walked out, boots stomping in the snow. Their ship took off a few minutes later, leaving a thick cloud of dust and silence behind. Jack waited until the sound of engines was gone. Then he rushed to the panel and pulled it open. Lyra and the girl crawled out, coughing from the dust, eyes wide with fear. "They're gone," Jack said. For now, Lyra stood up, still shaking. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "I thought they found us." Jack looked at her, eyes steady. "You're not going back," he said firmly. "Not while I'm alive." The child tugged on Jack's hand. "Are we safe now?" she asked. Jack knelt down and smiled at her. "Yes, little one," he said. "You're safe here." That night, Lyra didn't sleep in the corner. She sat beside Jack near the fire. Her daughter curled between them. The flames danced gently, and the fear in the room slowly faded outside. The snow covered the slavers' footprints, but inside, warmth returned not just from the fire, but from something stronger. Lyra looked at Jack, her voice quiet but strong. "You didn't have to protect us," she said. Jack looked back at her. "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to." The storm came quickly. Dark clouds rolled over the colony sky like waves crashing from above. The wind howled like a hungry beast, shaking old metal roofs and tearing loose cables from walls. Snow fell thick and heavy, turning the streets in two. White Rivers, Jack secured the front door, bolting it tightly. He stacked more fuel near the fire and checked the thermal heater twice. Lyra helped him carry supplies inside blankets. Water packs, extra batteries. Her movements were faster now, stronger. Not like the quiet ghost who first arrived, and her daughter followed them closely, dragging her toy wrench like a helper. "You've lived through storms like this before?" Jack asked, wiping snow off his coat. Lyra nodded, her face serious. "On my home planet, snow came like this," she said. "But the beasts didn't." Jack turned his head. "What beasts?" She paused, then lowered her voice. "Something has been following the colony's power signals," she said, big, fast, drawn to heat. Jack had heard the rumors miners missing. Footprints in the snow, too large to be human. He never believed them until now, that night. As the wind screamed outside, Jack sat with a pulse rifle on his lap. Lyra held her daughter close, humming a lullaby in her own language. The girl fell asleep quickly, tired from the long day. Jack looked out through the narrow window slit, watching, waiting. Then he saw it, a shape, tall and wide, moving through the snow like a ghost. It stopped near the colony square. Sniffing the air, its skin was pale gray, almost blending into the snow. But its eyes bright blue and glowing cut through the dark like stars. Jack stood quickly. "Get to the crawl space," he whispered. Now, Lyra didn't argue. She wrapped her daughter in a blanket and hurried toward the hidden panel. But before she could reach it, the beast roared. The front door slammed hard. Once, twice. The metal groaned under the weight. Jack raised his rifle, heart pounding. But the lock wouldn't last long. "Go," he shouted, pointing to the wall. Lyra tried to open the panel, but it jammed frozen from the cold. The third hit broke the door open, and the snow beast stepped inside. It was taller than any man, with claws like knives and breaths that steamed like boiling water. It growled, eyes scanning the warm room. It saw the fire, the blankets, the movement. Lyra stood between the beast and her daughter, her arms wide. Jack fired once. Then again the shots hit, but didn't stop it. The beast roared and charged, knocking over the table, sending tools flying. Jack dived to grab a second weapon in. Old shock baton. He activated it, lightning buzzing from the tip, but before he could strike, the beast swung its arm and threw him across the room. He hit the wall hard, vision going black for a moment. Lyra didn't run. She picked up a metal pan from the floor and screamed a deep, angry scream that echoed through the shelter. The beast turned to her. Surprised, she swung the pan with both hands, striking it in the head, then again and again, screaming as tears ran down her face. "This is my child," she shouted. "You won't take her." The beast stumbled, shaking its head. Jack, half conscious, crawled toward the dropped rifle. Lyra swung once more, this time hitting the beast's eye. It howled in pain, then turned and ran back into the storm, crashing through the broken door. The silence returned, broken only by the soft sobs of Lyra and the crackle of the fire. Jack sat up, groaning, blood on his forehead. He looked at her hair wild, her hands shaking, the dented pan still in her grip, and he whispered, "You saved us." Lyra dropped the pan and rushed to her daughter, who was hiding under the shelf. The girl ran into her arms, crying. Jack leaned back against the wall, breathing hard, his vision still spinning, but his heart full. Later, after they sealed the door and fixed the fire, Jack sat beside Lyra. She cleaned the wound on his head with gentle hands. "You stood up to a snow beast," he said with a weak smile. Lyra looked at him and smiled back. "I'm a mother," she replied. "That's what we do." They laughed softly, tired but alive, and for the first time, Jack saw something new in her eyes. Not just fear or pain, but pride, strength, and something else. Trust. Outside, the storm still raged, but inside the small shelter there was warmth, courage, and something stronger than both hope. The sun rose slowly over the snowy colony. The storm had passed, but the damage was clear: broken fences, scattered crates, and deep claw marks in the walls of nearby buildings. Jack stood outside his shelter, hammering a new lock onto the door. Lyra swept up the mess inside, her daughter playing quietly near the fire with colored stones. The beast was gone, for now, but the fear still lingered in the colony air. People whispered, glancing at the forest beyond the fence, but no one spoke to Jack. They had seen the damage and the blood. They had heard the roars through the storm. Still, no one asked what happened. No one asked if Jack was okay. Maybe they already knew the answer, or maybe they didn't want to get involved. Later that day, Jack stood in front of the registration office, a small building with peeling paint and a broken sign that read Civil Records. Lyra stood beside him, wearing a clean coat Jack had given her. Her daughter clutched her leg. Hiding behind the folds of the fabric, Jack stepped up to the counter. The colony officer was an old human man with thin glasses and a sour face. He looked at Jack, then at Lyra, then at the child. "What is this?" the man asked, voice flat. "I want to register them," Jack said. "As my family?" The man blinked. "You're joking," he said. "She's not even human." Jack didn't blink. "She's a child," he said, "and she lives with me now." The man sighed and pulled out a form. "It's your life," he muttered. "Name of the child." Jack looked at Lyra. She hesitated, then knelt beside her daughter. "Do you want a new name?" she asked softly. The girl nodded slowly. Lyra turned to Jack, her voice quiet but steady. "You choose," she said. Jack knelt down and looked into the girl's eyes. "Hope," he said. "Let's call her Hope." The girl smiled and nodded. "Hope," she whispered, trying the name for herself. The officer grunted and wrote it down. Last name. Jack didn't even think. "Same as mine," he said. "Hope Walker." Lyra looked at him, surprised. Jack handed the man his ID chip, scanning it to confirm the registration. "You know what this means?" The officer said, glancing at Lyra, "She's under your protection now." Jack nodded. She already was. They left the office with a small card that read Hope Walker, dependent. It was cheap plastic, but to Lyra, it felt like gold. She stared at it, her hands shaking. I never thought she'd have a name. She whispered, "A real one." Back at the shelter, Lyra helped hang a new curtain. She cooked stew using old vegetables and dried meat. Jack watched her move calm. Hope laughed as Jack tried to braid her hair. He was terrible at it, but she didn't care. Lyra sat nearby, holding a warm drink. A soft smile on her lips. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "The name, the ID, everything." Jack looked at her, his voice steady. "I wanted to," he replied. "You're not just survivors anymore. Your family." Tears filled Lyra's eyes. But she didn't look away this time. "I used to dream of a place like this," she said. "Before the mines, a place where I didn't have to give myself to feed my daughter. A place where someone looked at me and saw more than scars." Jack didn't respond with words. He reached over and gently took her hand. She didn't pull away. She held it, her fingers curling around his like she belonged there. Hope crawled into Jack's lap, curling against him like a kitten. She was asleep within seconds. Lyra stood and placed a blanket over them both, then sat back down beside the fire, watching the flames dance across the walls. Outside, the colony was still cold, still dangerous, but inside the little shelter, there was peace, a bed for each of them, food on the table, laughter in the air, and a name, Hope Walker, that meant everything had changed. The sky above the colony was clear for the first time in days. Snow still covered the ground, but the sun broke through, lighting the world with soft golden light. Inside Jack's shelter, the smell of stew filled the air. Spices, vegetables, and slow-cooked meat simmered in a pot. The warmth of it wrapped the room like a hug. Lyra stood by the table, folding clean cloths. Her daughter Hope Walker was building a small house from scrap pieces beside the fire. Jack stirred the stew, slowly, humming a quiet tune from Earth. Everything felt different now. Like the pain of the past had turned into something strong and real. Jack looked over at Hope, who was now trying to stick two uneven pieces of metal together. She giggled when they fell apart, then tried again. Lyra turned and watched her, her lips forming a small, peaceful smile. "She never gives up," she whispered. "She's like you," Jack replied, smiling back at Lyra. "Both of you are." They set the table together, 3 bowls, 3 wooden spoons, and a single candle in the middle. Lyra smoothed her hand over the tablecloth. Just a faded sheet, but clean and carefully placed. "Tonight," Jack said, "we eat like a family." Lyra's eyes filled with something she hadn't felt in years. Joy. Hope jumped up when Jack called her, racing to the table. She climbed into her chair and clapped her hands excitedly. "Food time," she said happily. Jack served her first, then Lyra, then himself. For a moment, no one said anything. They just ate slowly, enjoying each warm bite. Hope made a happy noise with every spoonful. Lyra watched her daughter eat, and whoosh, then looked across the table at Jack. She set her spoon down and spoke softly. "There's something I need to say." Jack looked up, nodding. "That night in the alley," she began, her voice a little shaky. "I told you I'd give myself to you for food." Jack didn't interrupt. "I meant it," she continued. "I was ready to sell the only thing I had left, my body, because I thought there was no other way. I thought no one would help me without taking something." Jack's face was calm, kind. "You were protecting your child," he said. "There's no shame in that." Lyra's eyes shimmered. "But you didn't take anything," she whispered. "You gave a meal, a bed, safety, and now a name." She reached across the table and touched his hand. "You changed everything," she said, "and I'll never forget that." Hope looked up from her bowl, blinking at both of them. "Are you crying, Mama?" she asked softly. Lyra laughed a little, wiping her cheek. "No, little one," she said. "I'm just happy." Hope stood on her chair and reached across the table to touch Jack's arm. "Are you my papa now?" she asked, in the most innocent voice. Jack felt his heart skip. He looked at Lyra, unsure what to say. But Lyra gave him a small nod full of trust, full of something deeper. He looked back at Hope and smiled. "If you want me to be," he said, "then yes, I am." Hope cheered and clapped, then sat back down to finish her stew. Lyra reached out and held Jack's hand again. This time not as a stranger or as a guest, but as someone who had found a place where she truly belonged. That night, after Hope fell asleep on the couch with her tiny hand clutching her toy wrench, Jack and Lyra sat together by the fire, sharing the last of the stew. Lyra leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing softly. "There were so many nights I didn't think we'd survive," she said. "So many times I wished for someone to see us." Jack turned to her gently. "I saw you," he said. "The moment I looked in that alley, saw you." They sat in silence, just the fire crackling. No promises were made, no need for words. What they had built spoke for itself, strong, quiet, full of life, a home outside. The cold wind blew across the colony, but inside? Warmth lived not, just in the fire, but in their hearts, a mother, a daughter, and a man who gave without asking, and all because of one moment in an alley, or in one meal that changed everything.